Boys, it's good to be back. NRL Fantasy 2022 coming at ya. Start of the season. 3 hours away, as you can see from the lockout. 3 hours away. I'm extremely excited. I know you guys already are. I've seen a lot of different teams in the various Facebook groups, Discords, Reddit, anywhere and everywhere. PMs. There's a lot of different combinations. There's a lot of different trains of thought for this year. The fact that Cleary is out has made it interesting. It means people have had to mix up that role a little bit, divulge the money a little bit elsewhere. Will people be going with the second best fantasy scorer from last year, which is Tommy Trbojevic? Who knows? For me, this is the team that I've got in front of me that will be walking in for 3 hours' time for the kickoff. You would have seen 2 days ago, I put my bare bones team together when I went thoroughly through each of the team lists, player by player, pulling together all the cheapies, and in the last 48 hours, I've been able to do a lot more homework, a lot more honing in, a lot more problem solving, a lot more filling in the gaps and understanding where I want to land, what I want to do with this team, ensuring I've got enough coverage, having a policy of no idiots, guys who are going to get suspended, guys who do outside antics outside the teams, getting in trouble, because guess what? With a squad of only 21 players, you definitely need to have every player available each week. Taking away, suspensions or whatever else. So I've put together, this is my team. I'm going to walk you through it position by position to give you a thorough understanding of how I've come to this team, why it's the team that it is, and what I'm hoping for long term. So straight from the bat, Chris Randall, Hawker, 350 grand. He's most likely going to be playing 80 minutes, if not in that higher 60-70 region. We know he's a tackling machine. We know that he doesn't make many missed tackles. That's why we've got him. It's a no-brainer for me. He's one of the only cheap hookers at the start of this season that's going to be starting and taking in those big minutes and potentially big upside for fantasy scores. So that for me was a no-brainer. My mid is Bullemor, Curran, and Haas. And I'm also going to be going through what my pods are. Curran is a huge pod for me at 6.2%. Look, the thinking there is that I believe he's a solid workhorse. He's going to be working with the Warriors pack. I expect him to be playing 80 minutes. If he starts to dwindle down to 60, 50, I'll immediately trade him out. I can understand he's not for everyone because he is at the higher price range. But I just think that being the workhorse he is, he's going to be able to sustain that higher scoring that's required, that I want out of him, which is over 50 points. Bullemor, another no-brainer. Going to be starting in the second row for Manly, and looks to be keeping his spot, albeit any other additions coming into the squad anyway. So Bullemor's a bit of a solid pick for me in that mid-range, 331 grand. Again, a no-brainer. Payne Haas I've brought in, 782k. He's the enforcer. He loves to score. Big fantasy points. He loves the offloads. We already know that the offload points have gone up this year. It's gone up to 4 points per offload to the hand and 2 points if you offload to the grass. The reality is Payne Haas is a workhorse. Again, similar like Curran, he's a bigger build. He can, while he may play less minutes, his points per minute is obviously higher, and I'm expecting that big work rate, especially with the Broncos, who may be struggling this season as well. So Haas, no-brainer, big minutes, big PPM player. Having him in there is my go-to. Angus Crichton, only 10%, so 1 out of every 10 teams or thereabouts have elected to go with Angus Crichton. Angus Crichton for me is just another solid pick. I don't want to be flimsy with picks. I know people have gone with someone like a Jai Arrow thinking his minutes are going to be picked up and that he'll have a higher work rate, and that potentially may be the case, but looking at the pack for the Roosters, my guess here is that Crichton will most likely be playing 80 minutes, maybe 70. Maybe if they want to give him a quick spill at the end or middle of the game. But we know Angus Crichton loves to offload the ball, similar to Haas. And my next pick, being my captain's choice for this week at the moment, is David Fifita. Can't go wrong with Big Dave. Highest scoring fantasy player in the edge position. I'm expecting bigger things from him. He's had a good off-season. He had good impacts in the trials from what we saw. So I'm expecting him to get a lot of ball his way, and similar to last year, is just steamroll those points through. Now, this is where it gets interesting. We've kind of given the no-brainers and the higher options. What are we doing in the halves? Now, for the halves, I've got Mann and Schneider. We know that Mann is starting lock for the Knights from the kickoff. I'm a little bit suspicious that Barnett may come in for that role. We don't really know the full rotation of that squad yet. But with Mann starting at lock, potentially like owning that position, maybe even 80 minutes, I'm expecting him to score higher than he has in the prior seasons. And if you look at the NRL fantasy stats, the expectation is that when he plays in the middle is that he's going to get those higher points than what he did at centre, obviously filling in for the Knights while they had a few injuries in the back end of last year. So I think he's going to go up. I originally had Mitchell Moses, and while Mitchell Moses may score a little bit higher than Mann, the problem I had with Mitch and a lot of halves in general, barring Cleary and also DCE, is that they can be rocks and diamonds from week to week. Whereas if Mann is starting lock and he's going to hold that position, I'm expecting like minimum 35, right? 40, 50, maybe even more. But we know Mann is a bit of a workhorse. He's on the smaller side of most locks, so I wouldn't expect him to get massively killing it in the attacking stats, but at 472 filling in for the half role, I think that's a bit of a no-brainer for me. Also, with this squad, I don't have any other mid coverage. We'll get to my emergencies later, which is Max King, but if one of my mid players does go down, I don't want to fill in with Max King at the moment because he's coming off the interchange. So I can easily pull Mann up into the mid position, and I can push one of these halves that I've got, whether it be Lachlan or Billy Walters, into that spot to kind of backfill that role temporarily, pending that injury. So some of the options I've gone with here are, the dual position players that can backfill other roles. Schneider, look, no brainer. Jamal Fogarty's out. It's going to be out for some time. There is rumour that Jock Madden may be coming into the squad with the whole Tigers escapade issue going on at the moment, trying to bid him over. But look, we know Schneider will most likely be goal kicking. We know he has a big boot. At 240k, you have to have him in the squad. You may not want to start him, but I just feel as though because he's going to be converting, because he's kind of filling in for like the Sam Williams role, he's good for that 35 points. And potentially more because Jared Croker isn't in the squad for the first week. So we know Schneider is probably the best option to be converting. And, I'm interested to see where Schneider goes. And I'll be watching him intensively for his game this week. But going off all the replay reels that we have, he does offer a bit in attack as well. So I've got him in the squad. I've got him in my starting squad. And I'll move, while I'm talking about the halves, I also have Billy Walters and Lachlan. Now, with Billy Walters, all the hype that's around him this week with his dad defending him, saying he's not the coach's kid and that he won't let us down and he's going to be big defensively. When Billy Walters plays more than 60 minutes, he gets above minimum 35 points. Sometimes he even gets in the 50-60 range, depending upon how the team's going. Now, he does have the Broncos pack around him, and they may not be able to convert a lot of the time into tries or into tackle bust or line breaks, etc. But I just think the fact that we know he'll be playing 80 minutes, and when Reynolds comes back, I believe Walters will be holding the spot and Albert Kelly will be given the flick. Watch this space. We're not 100% sure, but that spot at 5'8" is kind of up for grabs. And if I don't want to miss out holding on to Billy Walters. And so I'm actually playing him this week in my interchange because as an 80-minute half, I do expect him to do quite a bit of work with Lachlan. Excuse me. And he's owned at 21%. So 1 out of 5 coaches out there believe that's the case as well. With Lachlan, Ilias, look, no brainer, 40%. Majority of you guys have him. We know he's going to be playing 80 minutes. We've seen good stuff from him in the preseason. We know he can probably get up to that 500k. You've got to hold him in your squad. I think he'll go pretty well. I think he'll go well. He might not be a breakthrough half. He'll probably be below the better halves, even potentially below the mid-range halves. But at 300k, it's a steal price. My other half is Amone. Now, I only have 17k in reserve, so I was kind of tossing up if I want Nene from the Cowboys starting in second row. My only problem with Nene is the fact that he had a lot of missed tackles last year for his, the tackles made versus missed tackle ratio, and that's generally not really good when you're trying to look at someone who's sustainable in your squad. Now, he might have tightened that up a little bit. Speaking of Nene's, he may have tightened that up a little bit. But the reality is, for me, I'm a little bit skeptical. I can always pick him up the following week. We know Amone's going to be playing the 80 minutes. He looked good in the pre-trials. People are kind of moving away from him simply because of the Ben Hunt, owning the squad. But the reality is, Amone does still do a lot of the work in the squad, and he's actually got quite a bit of a big boot on him. So while Ben Hunt might be leading the squad around, I think you'll find Amone will be more involved. And at 80 minutes playing, I'd rather take the risk on this position as opposed to Nene, who could be dropped to the interchange bench the following week. Again, I can always change that up. I can always go to Nene from Amone if I want. It doesn't matter which halves pairing I'm going with. Because I've got all of them on the interchange. But again, going back to the Mann situation, I can always pull Mann up into the mid-ranges by pulling one of these halves in, should one of the mid-ranges get injured or suspended for a week or two. Now, my centre position, you'll know my philosophy has always been for years is that I genuinely don't like the centre position. If you do all the stats breakout, across all the positions, the center position always scores the lowest average across the comp. Now, there are some special cases with that. Players who are either playing out of position or players that are complete freaks that probably get primary ball over other players, such as Katoni Staggs. Absolute freak, can palm off anyone, always looking to make a play when it comes his way. But we know that second rowers will generally have a higher average and ceiling, and so a bad game for Bird or Aitken at second row starting is not the same as a bad game for a centre who may only get like 4 or 5 touches in a game and may not get a lot of tackling as a result of his position on whatever side he's defending. So, the problem I have with the Stephen Crichtons, and I know a lot of people are going him, and I know he will go up in value, I just want to be consistent with my scoring. I want to have 2 halves in there, and I'd prefer Amone over Stephen Crichton for that very same reason, is that centers can just have games where they don't get the ball, and it makes me extremely skeptical because the ceiling, while may be high, may get a double in a game, may even get a triple, may be highly involved. I'm just extremely suspicious about their involvement, whereas I know Aitken and Bird will be heavily involved for both teams. Aitken doesn't like passing the ball, we know that. He's one of the highest players of, I think looking at the stats last year, one of the players that had the highest amount of touches with the least amount of passes, which meant he loves running the ball, right? Guys outside him won't score well because he loves holding the ball. And while he may get tackled, there's going to be other times when he breaks a tackle and gets those extra 2-3 points just by holding the ball instead of offloading it. So that's my thinking. I know a lot of people have steered away from Jack Bird. In fact, he's only in 1 in 10 teams. But everything about the pre-trials to me, he looked solid. He looked involved. He looked like he had a good palm. He looked like he wanted to run the ball at times. He looked like he wanted to be involved overall. So I've gone... that's my centre thinking. I've just avoided centres at all in my squad. Going over to fullbacks, look, I've played it safe. Papenhuyzen, Tedesco. There are many other options. Xavier Coates, 330 grand. Only problem with Xavier Coates is we know that even when he plays 80 minutes on the wing, and he's a big guy and can probably make a lot of tackle busts and a lot of breaks and also offloads, I'm just skeptical about how low of a ceiling he can be. Now, he's outside Justin Olam, who generally will hold the ball up. I think that Xavier Coates will score better now, being in the Storm team as opposed to the Bronx, 100%. But I I just want to raise that bar a little bit, and I wanted to bring in Fidow, the hammer, because I think that he offers a little bit more on attack. Now, Hammer's stats are a little bit all over the place because he was playing center, then he was playing fullback, then he was playing center, then he was playing fullback. And there is skepticism about him holding the fullback squad because Valentine Holmes is still playing center, is in the starting squad, and isn't injured. For me, the problem I have with that is if they were really looking at Holmes, even though he's the marquee player, probably has the highest paycheck in the squad, if they were looking at him to be the fullback, they would have put him in the trials. They would have put him in they would have put him in that position leading up to the team list Tuesday, and they just didn't. Hammer, while maybe a little bit of a rocks and diamonds players at time, I think that he'll have that ceiling. I think this year, he's got a couple of seasons under his belt. He'll be a little bit more comfortable. Yes, it is the Cowboys. I don't believe they're going to be scoring, amazing scores and offering a lot of tries and a lot of easy points to the Hammer. But I just think in him bringing the ball back and being a bit of a threat and being a bit of a speedster, he can just get involved, and being fullback means you'll generally get way more ball than a winger would. So at a price hike of 140 grand to Xavier Coates or 120 grand to Stephen Crichton, or even like a Tago, I'm just comfortable with him holding that spot and being a more consistent team across the paddock. Now, for the players that I've missed, Tuilagi, 310. I don't think you can go wrong. 17.4%. Look, he had a lot of involvement last year, and we know that he's got a good points per minute average. He could find himself only playing 50 minutes in the second row, but the fact that he's starting, I'm willing to take that risk. There's not that many more players in that below 320 range that I could afford that I was willing to take the risk on. I think may have had the option of bringing in Tago for Tuilagi if I traded another player out and moved things around. But for me, I'm comfortable taking this risk. Like, this is a low risk, high potential play for me here. Now, he may get benched the following week, and then I can always burn a trade next week, just pulling in another rookie that seems to have found like a starting spot. I've avoided going the Josh King route for 319. He's only got 5%. I think people are aware that he's a bit of a trap. A lot of skepticism about Josh King holding that spot when Harry Grant's back. Does Brandon Smith go to lock? Does Josh King get pushed back? Even when Josh King starts, we know that he's not a big fantasy scorer, so I just wanted to avoid that mess. And again, if he has a breakout, I can always trade him in. For the remaining part of my squad, my emergency bench. Now, my 4 benches, the way I've made this work is that all my interchange players are starting. 3 of them, I presume, are going to be 80-minute players, with the exception of Tuilagi. My emergency are just guys who are going to grind money, the cheapest I can possibly get. And that's achieved here at 220, 220, 220, 240. With Max King, I was actually talking to a really good analyst about this yesterday, my mate Luke. Max King being on the interchange is good. We know he's going to hold that spot. What's even better for Max King is that he's behind a forward pack that could easily get suspended, and then Max King finds himself starting. For example, Pengai Jr. You've also got, it's on the tip of my tongue, he's playing in the second row, Jack Hetherington. Guys who can just have brain snaps and lose 3 to 4 weeks. He can fill in that role, and who knows, he may be able to do that. So at 240, given that I've got a high price team and I needed to have cheapies, he was the best option for me. Leo Thompson, we spoke about in our last video, rugby union player coming over to league. Looks like he's got a lot to offer. One of the Saifidi brothers is injured for the meantime, so he's kind of found himself in the squad. Hopefully he can knock. He can absolutely kill it this week in playing, and he finds himself a solid spot in the 17, if not, potentially promoted into the 13 if there are injuries. Schiller's an interesting one. Not a lot of people got him, 10%. I totally understand that, because people are worried, hey, Croker could come in. For me, I went back and watched a few of Schiller's games, a few of his highlights. He looks like a solid ball runner who can probably get a couple of tackle busts. He also loves scoring tries. Now, I know in the lower divisions, it's not comparable to NRL First Division stuff, but he could potentially keep that spot. You know, we know Rapana's coming back. He's probably going to come on the wing. I don't think he's a threat there. I think Jared Croker's the only threat. But there's 2 center spots in that squad right now, and I think Schiller can potentially hold one of those spots. This is a risk I'm willing to take at 220. If he doesn't hold the spot next week, I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot really early. But I'm willing to take the risk in order to ensure that I've got the squad that I want on paper that I've currently got in there. Koala's an interesting one. He's filling in for Dylan Walker. We saw Dylan Walker's injury. We don't know how long Walker's out with that glute problem. It was a bit of a disgusting injury. We don't know how long he's out for. With Koala, I don't know how they're going to use him because they've got Lawton on the bench. And I imagine Lawton's going to fill in for the 9 behind Croker. Lachlan Croker, that is. And what does that mean for Koala? Now, I think they're going to play him like they play Dylan Walker. And when I looked at Dylan Walker's scores and stats, Dylan Walker can get like 40, 35, 50 points a game coming off the bench. Now, I don't believe a rookie's going to have that impact immediately. And it depends how they use him. He may just not get more minutes because they may be a little, I don't know, a little bit hesitant to play him like a Dylan Walker. But if he comes on with fresh legs at 220 as a bit of a backup who can probably fill in for any centre wing or fullback role if any of the backline gets injured and find himself a starting spot, I was willing to hold that now. Now, this is my squad. I'm extremely excited. I've pretty much used every single penny, and I'm super excited right now to be playing with this squad. I think it's going to be an absolute hoot. I think it's going to be an absolute ball this year. Let me know in the comment section below if you would have changed anything differently with my squad and what your squad is. I know that there's a lot of different trains of thought right now. I haven't really seen another squad similar to mine with so many people, so many of the players being a like-for-like comparison. But I think this is the way to go for me. And I'm willing to take a few risks with not having much to anything on my bench. I like the coverage I've got. The only real big risk I have is the hooker spot. I don't have a backup hooker. I don't know if a lot of people will. I know there's another avenue of thought to bring in Brandon Smith to potentially fill that gap in, but I'm gonna risk that for now. Otherwise, I have pretty good cover across the park, just in case anything happens. So this is my squad. Extremely excited to be playing this year, guys. Best of luck to everyone. I hope you have a hoot. I'll be back every Tuesday night, bringing more fantasy videos in. Super excited. Let me know what your thoughts are on my squad. Let me know if you do anything drastically different. Maybe I've missed something and you can like quickly hit me up before kickoff. Of course, I'll be looking up all the late mail before the game's going away and any social media posts of what's going on with the players to make sure these guys are actually playing and not pulled out last minute. Super excited. Get into it, guys, and I'll see you next week, and good luck. Whoosh.